It's just gone 8 o'clock, and it falls to me just to kind of open this evening's call up, which is just absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much, everybody, for giving up loads of your time on this Friday afternoon stroke evening. It's a great pleasure to see you all here. Most of you won't know me. Just very briefly to give you a quick intro into my background. I started off in sports science and then quickly moved into physiotherapy, became a chartered physio in the UK, spent a bit of time in the NHS, and then moved on into the British Army as a physiotherapist, where I spent 10 years before leaving the army and settling in the northeast of England in corporate healthcare. Suffice to say that my passion through life really has been about trying to find solutions for helping people to improve their performance and their health and nutrition. So it is an absolute privilege this evening to be opening up this call and to welcome you all here. As Laurie said earlier, you are going to learn a huge amount. So please get those questions in the chat box, and we look forward to exploring all those deep learning needs as we go through this evening. So as I say, I'm delighted to welcome this evening our keynote speaker, a truly renowned speaker, author, and researcher with a vast experience and knowledge in the health, sport, and nutrition arena, really second to none. So it really is an honor to have this person with us to impart his research and knowledge to all of us this evening. He is a fellow, and I think at the last count, he is a fellow of at least 3 organizations: the American College of Sports Medicine, the Obesity Society, the International Society of Sports Nutrition. And for those of you that don't know, being made a fellow of these organizations is the highest accolade any academic person can be given by these organizations. So a wonderful achievement and a true accolade in itself. This person has published more than 56 peer-reviewed research articles around performance, nutrition, and exercise training in some of the world's most respected, well-known international journals. And of particular note, he has spent some great time looking at the importance of protein and made some brilliant scientific discoveries about how the use of protein can help to improve and enhance our performance and our health and well-being, alongside and indeed in replacement of some of the aspects of a normal healthy heart diet. And he'll tell you loads more about that during this talk. This has led to a term called protein pacing and the PRIZE protocol. And this is what we're going to be starting off talking about, amongst many other things, this evening. So without any further ado, it gives me great honor to, and it's a privilege to welcome Dr. Paul Arciero to the call. Dr. Paul, we are looking forward to hearing what you have to say. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Have I been unmuted?
I believe you have. I can hear you.
Okay. Outstanding. Well, thank you for that introduction. That was quite an elevated intro at that. So thank you, Mark, for that. And I apologize for the slides. For those of you who are not familiar, as I'm not, with Florida weather in the U.S., windstorms can come in very spontaneously. So this morning, one started to kick up, and I'm in a hotel. As Mark just said, I received an award last night for fellow in the International Society of Sport Nutrition. And so I had my presentation ready to go. And despite my best efforts for the last now nearly almost 3 hours, the power has been going on and off. So I apologize for that, not being able to. I'm trying to send them again. So hopefully, Laurie, you might be able to receive those. But we're going to carry on, assuming that we don't have those slides, if that's all right with everyone. So I'm really excited and I'm grateful, honored to be asked to be on the call. So thank you, Lori and Mark and Eric and John, for including me, because it's what I most am passionate about in the work that I do. Am I still coming through? I just see you appeared again, Mark. Excellent. All right. So what I've had the good pleasure of having been able to experimentally test in the lab as a scientist is this dilemma that many of us face on a regular daily basis as to the top quality nourishment that we should be putting into our body, number one. Number two is the landscape of the type of exercise and movement and fitness that we should be engaged in on a regular basis. And as I'm sure as many callers and listeners we have on this Zoom call right now, there's probably the same number of different ways of doing and thinking and living that we're all experimenting with in terms of our nutrition and our exercise. So I say that because we are inundated on a daily basis with a multitude of various different nutrition plans, diets, some of which are fads, some of which are trends, as well as exercise. And so that's been my mission for the last 30 years, is trying to hone in, and not just from a scientific perspective. I've been very fortunate and blessed with my research that has been well accepted among the scientific and medical community. The popular media has extensively highlighted my research. But much more importantly is the value that I am excited about bringing to the public, the masses, all of you listening here right now today, to impart and incorporate into your daily routine in as seamless of a manner as possible. So that's been the driving force of my research. And I want to highlight that because I think that's really important. Yes, I'm a scientist. Yes, I have lots of scientific publications, and I'm acknowledged for that science and that research, and I'm grateful for that. But ultimately, to me, the much more important and higher value add that I like to bring to my audiences is how they can utilize it in their own lives to augment and facilitate and magnify their results from a physical health standpoint as well as a performance. And so I'm at this conference right now. It's an international conference on sport nutrition, for which I was just inducted as a fellow in. And it's very important data. It's very important research. But ultimately, my eye is always toward the research that is not only providing a sport nutrition benefit, but perhaps more importantly, in my view, a health benefit, an overall health benefit, because ultimately that's what we're striving for. And the two are not the same. They can be very mutually exclusive. For example, we know the lengths and the extent that certain athletes go to for the sole purpose of winning a gold medal or winning a championship or whatever it is that they're striving for. That in many cases, unfortunately, they use that as their defining life goal. And health is not an important variable. I mean, that's the reality. I've been an athlete. I've been around high-level athletes for a long time. And the truth is that for many of them, it's about performance. They want to just perform well. And if health is sacrificed along the way, oh well, because we want performance, right? We're high-level functioning athletes. And so anyway, I'm here to, I hope, shed light on the fact and the evidence-based that we can achieve optimal physical performance at the same time we're accomplishing health. Now, some people have no interest in performance, right? So we have another end of this perspective. People are just motivated by, wanting to be healthier, wanting to be able to walk on the beach as I look out the window, with their grandchildren, right? I mean, how valuable is that for people? And so that's I'm giving you a little bit of a philosophical perspective on my approach. And I think that's the most important thing I can do right now is let you know where I'm coming from with the research that I do and the commitment that I've made to my mission of purpose as a scientist and a researcher and a keynote speaker and an author, is that I'm ultimately driven and motivated by helping people understand that we can achieve optimal health and optimal physical performance in tandem, simultaneously, mutually beneficial for both, as opposed to looking at these as two, in some cases, opposing lifestyle strategies. So as it relates to nutrition, there's a great slide that I can't show you, but it shows a double stacked greasy cheeseburger and an apple. And it says, every time you eat or drink, you are either feeding disease or fighting disease and promoting health. And, that pretty much says it all. To this day, over the history of humankind, how did we get this? Lori, did it come through?
Eric is a magician. Let's just go with that.
Eric the magician. Awesome. I feel like you're in my hotel room right now, Eric, working my computer. So it's technology. All right. So there's the slide. And that's true. And so I want to just highlight this. And this is a really good starting point because to me, it says everything that we have a choice to make in influencing our health in the most powerful way with the food that we eat. Why? Because we do nothing more often than eat. And so that's where so much value lies. I mean, think of here's one of the points I'd like to make is that think about the things that you do over the course of the day. I have this saying that drives my children nuts. What you do is what you become. And they say, yeah, be quiet, Dad. But it's a powerful statement. And so here it is. And so during the day we eat, that's what we do. We nourish our bodies. And that's what you become. So how you nourish your body is how you become. If you don't sleep, then you become a living, walking mess, right? If you don't sleep. We know that. And I know that for decades, we were priding ourselves as at least in modern societies, on the value of, not the value, but the fact that we don't need sleep and we can function really, really well. And that's been completely turned upside down. That we need that sleep, we need that rest. So that's of ultimate value. So great starting point for us in this, that what you do is what you become. If you don't sleep, you don't function. If you don't eat well, you don't function well. If you don't work and live in a social work relationship environment that's healthy and nurturing, well, then you're not going to be happy. So all these things fit together. So I think what you're learning is that I'm a holistic thinker as I approach all of this. I'm not doing this in a bubble or in a vacuum. These things are all tightly interwoven and related. All right, so the next slide, magician, Eric, is showing you what the current recommendations are for exercise. Now, these are the North American, Canada, US, I think even Mexico, but they are derived from the American College of Sports Medicine, which is actually the world leading governing body of sports medicine. It just so happens to have a name of the American College, but it's worldwide and it's recognized, and it is comprised of leading scientists from all over the world. And as Mark stated, I'm also a fellow in this organization. In fact, my research has been incorporated into these exercise recommendations that we make worldwide for people to follow. So I'm showing you this slide because to me it's such a noble and optimistic. And I'm going to say a word here that I don't mean to belittle this at all, but it's idealistic. It would be the ideal for people to follow. And if you can see the small print, that the exercise recommendations are derived of or comprised of 4 different components. Number 1 is cardiovascular, or what we often refer to as aerobic endurance exercise. Number 2 is resistance. So aerobic exercise, an example of that would be walking, jogging, running, swimming, biking. Resistance would be what you would go to the gym and do with lifting weights. Flexibility would be what you would do when you stretch. And neuromotor would be things that you would do with agility. And balance. So there's a little bit of carryover to that into the resistance and stretching, of course, that neuromotor, because it's really impossible to do yoga or Tai Chi without some level of balance in there. So the neuromotor is a little bit inclusive in some of the others. I'm not quite sure why it's by itself, given how you can include it in some of the others, but that's what it is. And so these are what the exercise recommendations are currently right now as they exist. And as I said, if you were to add up all the recommendations for each of these different types of exercise, it would be a lot of exercise. It would be the equivalent of somewhere at a very, very minimum of 7 hours to as much as 14 hours. And I don't know about you, but I'm a fit, trained individual. And for me to think about doing, I'd say even 7 hours on a regular basis over the course of a week is next to impossible. That's a lot of exercise. So it's not to say I'm against exercise. I'm a huge proponent of it. I have my PhD in exercise physiology. And so I believe in exercise. It's got great merit. But to expect the population to strive to meet these recommendations is, just as I said, idealistic. And so as a result, about 20% or less of the population, at least here in the States and in Canada, maybe a little bit more, but not much, meet this recommendation because it's so excessive, it's so extreme. So as a result of this, what I would call confusion, information overload is a really good word I like to use, surrounding nutrition and exercise, I've developed my own protocol. So over the last 30 years, I've developed a protocol. It's called the PRIZE protocol. So the next slide shows you the PRIZE protocol slide. And this is really what I call the new science of nutrition and fitness. And it's really exciting because it's so time efficient. It's scientifically proven. It's not idealistic, but instead realistic. And so this is what I want to share with you today in the next several minutes. So the next slide shows you the PRIZE protocol as it's broken down, and it's comprised of 5 components. And again, we spell PRIZE similar to how the Brits spell it in some cases, P-R-I-S-E, not P-R-I-Z-E. So it's appropriate that I'm speaking, I know, to some of our friends across the ocean there. So it's comprised of protein pacing. That's the foundation. That's the underlying basis of the PRIZE protocol. It's what everyone should be following. And I say that within the context of understanding right now we have this very heightened interest and focus on so many different nutritional strategies. One, of course, is the ketogenic diet. Another is the paleo diet. We have the Mediterranean diet, the MIND diet, which is a combination of the Mediterranean and the DASH diet. We have plant-based eating. So the list goes on and on. I could reel off another dozen fairly easy. The point of it is that the underlying, or I would say the common denominator of every single diet that's out there is protein pacing. That if you look at these diets, you look at how they are structured, you look at what is never compromised, it is protein. Now, what protein pacing is not is a high protein diet. Protein pacing is not a high protein diet. Protein pacing is, I'll get to this in a moment, the delivery of the protein in the appropriate manner to maximize our body's response to it from both a physical standpoint, health standpoint, and a physical performance standpoint. And then the other 4 components are the movement, exercise components, which I really like the acronym of RISE. It really fosters and encourages people to get up and rise. So it's resistance, interval, stretching, and endurance. And of course, I don't call stretching yoga because a lot of people are a little bit unsure of whether they want to do yoga. But it doesn't have to be yoga. It can be various forms of stretching and pliability exercises and mobility exercises, joint mobility. So it's a combination. Excuse me while I take a drink. This humid weather down here in Florida is dehydrating. So those are the critical components of the PRIZE protocol. And they've been scientifically tested now in a number of different segments of the population, disease populations, people who are at risk for type 2 diabetes, for cardiovascular disease, including hypertension, various other metabolic diseases, people with orthopedic limitations. So it's been tested it's been tested in highly trained athletes. It's been tested in people of all ages, from late teenage years, 18, all the way up to 60, 65. So I've had a very robust scientific testing and validation of the PRIZE protocol. So the next slide shows us how this PRIZE protocol would fit into a daily routine. It's protein pacing, which is a constant every day, unless you're doing an intermittent fasting day, which is, again, another dietary intervention strategy that still has protein pacing as a primary component within it, depending upon even if you're eating within that eating schedule. I know over in Europe, the 5-2 is fairly common by Dr. Let's say Mosley, but you all know him well because he's a Brit. And so still, even with that, protein pacing is a very important foundation of that eating pattern. So we have the resistance, we have the interval, stretching, and endurance. And then the next slide shows really the protein pacing, and that is the right type, that's the quality, in the right amount at the right time. And that is what provides us optimal health and physical performance. So, much of this was born out of me entering into this field and understanding all these different viewpoints that were coming in with nutrition and trying to make sense out of it. Because, the vegetarian diet was showing some benefits in some ways, but not necessarily in others. For example, it was showing healthy body weight control, but body composition was not always that good in vegetarians and especially vegans. It had some relatively good heart protective benefits, but sometimes blood sugar was not always necessarily ideal. The ketogenic diet, of course, has some advantages. It was derived for treating epilepsy and seizures, of course, and so people have now applied it to more of a healthy population, but it's not without its limitations. And so when these things are done inappropriately or extreme, and protein pacing is compromised, that's when you don't maximize the benefit of it. And so this protein pacing that you see in front of you, the right type, which is the quality aspect, that's number one, quality. Number two is the quantity. You have to have the right quantity of the protein coming in. And then number three is the timing. The frequency is really at the essence of the protein pacing. All right, the next slide just shows you a spattering of some of the scientific research publications. These are all peer-reviewed, some of which are in very high impact scientific journals. Next slide shows you how well it's been received by the leading organizations. So it's been acknowledged and written up by some of the leading organizations in the world. Now, what's very unique, and this is one of the main points I want you to take away here, is that as you see in the green there, as opposed to a 20% compliance of what we currently have with our current nutrition recommendations and exercise recommendations, is we have up to an 80% or more compliance that I've had with the PRIZE protocol. So those are on two ends of the spectrum. Current recommendation of 20% versus up to 80%, which is what we really want to strive for. So the next slide we're going to just pass right over because it's showing you the extensive media attention. But I think this is going back to my beginning of this, is that, the research is great, and the acceptance by the other scientists and other leading medical and scientific organizations is fantastic, because it lends it that street cred. But the true street cred really comes from, the media putting it out there, because now we have good science that, the media is reporting on and providing to the general public. And so, I like to think of myself as a scientist who brings his research to the streets, so that everyone can benefit from it. And that's the goal. So I'm going to continue on. Here's another slide of the recent study that I did testing in the independent. So I want to focus on two studies just to give everyone a context here. I conducted two studies that I think are really telling to prize. The first one was a study that I conducted on just protein pacing. So independent of the RISE. And the reason I did this was because there's always the possible confounding nature of exercise influencing the results of a study. And so what I said was, all right, let's separate it out. And I'll recruit a group of men and women, both men and women, of varying ages, and I will require them, as part of the study, to only engage in a nutritional intervention. They are not allowed to exercise. So keep that in mind as you see this. And so this was the Skidmore weight loss study. It was a two-phased study. The first 12 weeks were comparing the men's response to the women's, because it's often reported that men and women respond differently to a nutritional intervention. So I wanted to first separate out that and just see what affects this protein pacing alone with 1 day a week of intermittent fasting had on their health. And then I wanted to compare the protein pacing intermittent fast to a heart healthy diet. It's fairly well recognized worldwide that there's a heart healthy diet that is very advantageous to help heart health. And so I wanted to compare this protein pacing up against really what many would consider as the gold standard of a healthy diet. So the next slide, good, just shows you some of these results from the 12-week diet only. And as you can see, starting off on the two bars to the left, the blue is always the men and the green is always the women. So as you look at these three sets of double bars here, they're showing one variable, body weight. Number two is fat mass. And number three is waist circumference. And it's always showing you the men and the women. Now, there looks to be a little bit of a difference, but there's no difference because these are absolute values. And of course, the men were starting higher, so they would have more to lose, which you would expect. So on a relative basis, there was absolutely no difference. And in fact, in some of the cases, women responded better than the men, but not significantly. So the major takeaway is that men and women responded identically to this protein pacing alone, intermittent fasting, 12-week diet. And that's profound. This was a remarkable study. It was published in one of the top physiology journals in the world, Frontiers in Physiology. So awesome data. I mean, I look at this and I still think, wow, this was a cool study because this affects everybody. I say that because at some point along our journey in life, we need to lose a little bit of weight, right? We need to lose a little bit of body weight, fat loss, maybe around our midsection. So huge, huge findings. The next slide is the one I get really excited about because it's breaking the fat down now into its really critical, important location. And that's the belly region. I call it belly fat. The visceral is the fat that's located around the vital organs. And it's very harmful to our health. And then our abdominal fat is the total amount that we have located in the abdominal region, subcutaneously, just underneath our skin. And again, you can see here phenomenal changes in both the men and the women. I mean, to observe these levels of decrease So, you know, there's that saying that you can't spot reduce, right? We've heard that for years. Well, I would argue differently. I would say that if you protein pace, and as you'll soon see with the rise, you can definitely target specific areas and heighten the degree of response that you achieve. There's just no question about that, that you can enhance the degree of your response. So really, really exciting data here. So next slide is moving on to, of course, the next critical, I don't know if it's, we can want to say really the next, but another equally extremely important area of our body, which is our muscle mass. And as you can see, among the men and the women, this was the combined data from the men and the women, not just one of them, but it was men and women combined here. There was a 9% increase in the proportion of their lean body mass. Now, just know that when you lose that much weight, so they lost 10% of their body weight, it was about 25 pounds on average, among all 40. There was 40 people. On average, they lost 25 pounds in 12 weeks. That's phenomenal. They had, as a group, a relative increase in their lean muscle mass of 9%. So that data alone is groundbreaking and really exciting. So I hope you're all thinking to yourself, put me on this as fast as you can, Dr. Paul. And I'm happy to, and we'll have plenty of opportunity at the end here. Next slide is just showing you the amount of weight that was lost in this 12-week time period. So if we took all 40 of these men and women, they lost collectively over 1,000 pounds. Incredible. Okay, next slide. So as I said before, I don't separate out health. I think that's really important from our goal of striving for our optimal life, our optimal lifestyle. And so I also measure heart health. And so we measured a marker of our blood vessels and how well they respond, and that was significantly improved. And then the two figures that you see down below in white, those represent blood pressure. And in this case, the men are represented by the dark black bars, and the women are represented by the gray bars. And as you can see, there was a significant reduction in both their upper systolic and their diastolic blood pressure in both men and women. So again, another phenomenal finding. The next slide is showing you what many of you are probably familiar with. When you go to an annual checkup, you get your blood lipids measured. And so these are your measures of your cholesterol, your good and bad cholesterol, your total cholesterol, then your good and bad cholesterol, and then your blood fat, which is called triglyceride or triacylglycerols. And not to go into any detail, just know that they were all significantly reduced as a result of their participating in this protein pacing nutrition intervention. So moving on, I'm going to continue on. I'm not sure if the slides are still viewable. So what the goal was then was to compare, as I said earlier, in a 1-year follow-up time period, the total group. So what we did was, because men and women didn't respond any differently, we collapsed the whole group together, men and women. We split them in half, and then we compared half of them, men and women, following the protein pacing intermittent fasting, with another half of them that were following the heart healthy group. So that's what we did in the remainder of the study. And so I'm going to summarize here, but what was so remarkable was that at the end of a year, so 52 weeks of them following this protein pacing intermittent fasting compared to this heart healthy diet, the group that was following the protein pacing intermittent fasting was able to maintain and actually improve on some of their results that they achieved during the first 11 weeks. And that was, again, a phenomenal finding, because there's something called recidivism, weight recidivism, and that is a very, very common occurrence in the majority of people that have lost weight within a year time period. They usually gain the weight back on. And that's exactly what happened with the group that was in the heart healthy group. They regained not all of their weight. So it's not saying that that was, a complete reversal back to where they started at the beginning of the study, but the heart healthy definitely was showing signs of people having weight regain and body fat regain over the course of the year, whereas the group that was following the protein pacing intermittent fasting was able to maintain what they had lost so beautifully in that first 11, 12 weeks at the end of the year. And that's a phenomenal finding. Again, I don't want to underscore that enough. So, yep, that's the slide there. If you want to go ahead and progress to the next slide, it's just showing you, you can skip that one. We've moved past that one, so you can go past that one. That's just a slide showing the toxin levels that I kind of passed over for time's sake. So keep scrolling there, Eric, if you could, please.
No more slides.
Oh, there's no more. Okay, no worries. So the next topic that I'm going to conclude on is, well, let me summarize that. So what happened from that study was there was so much data. And again, I'm only showing you a very small portion of all the data that we collected on these 40 people. This was a massive study. The funding agency that funded this was a private nutrition company, which is unheard of because I'm a third-party independent researcher. But they have a history of doing this type of scientific third-party independent unbiased research that they fund outside of the physical bounds of their operation, their facility, their corporate headquarters, which is again very unusual. So they contract out leading researchers across the world. I was one of them to do these types of studies, and so that in and of itself was extremely unique. That they provided me this complete autonomy and independence to conduct this study. And so this was a huge, massive undertaking. So it resulted in 3 peer-reviewed published studies. And the bottom line was that in men and women following protein pacing, independent of any exercise, they were doing no exercise, they massively enhanced their health from a body composition standpoint, from a cardiovascular standpoint, from a metabolic standpoint, from a toxin standpoint, from an oxidative stress standpoint, from a hormonal standpoint. All of those were significantly improved in men and women just following a protein pacing intermittent fasting routine. Phenomenal data published in 3 top-tiered peer-reviewed science publications. So really great stuff. So from that, as an athlete, I said, all right, this is too good. I got to keep moving here. So I want to incorporate this protein pacing in a fit population that's not going to give up their exercise. So I introduced the RISE component. So I took a fresh, whole new group, obviously, of men and women, 50 men and women. So big numbers here for research studies. And again, this is massive funding. This is not, a couple of $1,000s or even tens of thousands of dollars. This is hundreds of thousands of dollars in order to conduct these studies. So that just shows you that they truly, put their money where their mouth is in terms of funding. So they funded this study. I recruited 50 men and women. I put them on the PRIZE protocol for 12 weeks. And here's what was so cool about this. So what I did was I took the 50 men and women, divided them in half. So I had half the men and women following the PRIZE protocol, which included the protein pacing. And then I had the other half following the RISE, the resistance, interval stretching, and endurance, without the protein pacing. They were following commonly recommended nutrition strategies for active people. So it wasn't like they were, being told to do something really detrimental. That we were just supporting. They were each getting equal support by registered dietitians and my entire research team. So I operate with a team of up to 12 researchers that help support me with this research. And they were exercising together. So that's really important. So we had these, 25 men and women in each group, And it wasn't like the prize group exercisers were only exercising with each other. Not at all. They were all intermixed. So both groups were doing the resistance, interval, stretching, and endurance exercise with each other. So they didn't know who was in what group. The only difference was when we packaged up their nutritionals each week for them and put them in closed, concealed carry bags. So they didn't, weren't, knowing who was getting what. That was the only difference, was their nutritional support and the quality of their nutrition. So at the end of the 12 weeks, the results were amazing. And by the way, I have to point this out. The compliance in both groups with the protein pacing, rise, prize, and then just the rise group who were doing the same exercise routines, but following more commonly recommended nutritional strategies for athletes, there was up to an 80% compliance once again in these highly trained athletes. And why this is so compelling is because many times telling an athlete to perform, we had some marathon runners, we had some bodybuilders, fitness models, we had some CrossFit athletes, we had one professional roller derby athlete, we had triathletes. I mean, we had, you name it, we had the fit of the fittest. They were only allowed to exercise the 4 days. So here's proof again that, they were accustomed when they came into the study doing 5 to 7 days of hardcore exercise. And they were frightened that dropping down to only 4 days, and in this case, only allowed to do 1 day if they were a marathon runner of endurance exercise, or 1 day if they were a fitness model or bodybuilder of doing resistance training, they were terrified that they were going to lose their fitness. And rightly so. I would, coming in naive to that, I probably would have had the same thought if I hadn't had the science of what I have done for the last 30 years to support the value and the scientific credibility and validity and merit of the prize protocol. And what this speaks to, I want to just take a moment here and then I'm going to finish because I know we have other speakers, is, we're so often led to believe that more is better, that pushing ourselves to exhaustion on a regular daily basis, day in and day out, is the only way to achieve true optimal performance and fitness. And nothing could be further from the truth. And I really capture this opportunity when I'm on stage because one of the most telling signs was when these athletes came in for each of these workouts, on each of them were on a separate day, the energy, it was amazing. After 2 weeks, the energy that they had, I mean, they were blowing away their performance on their, results. Like if, it was a resistance day, if they came in and they were doing, 12 repetitions at a particular resistance, in 2 weeks, they were doing 15 repetitions at a much higher intensity level. My point is that they were consumed with energy, revitalizing energy, renewed energy is a good word. They just were feeling reinvigorated. That was a word they kept on referring to. Man, I feel so much more fresh, because they weren't depleted constantly and chronically. So I think that's a really important point, and I'm here to say that less is more in most cases, and we can really learn from that. Plus, we know that top-tiered athletes, so I'm a big tennis fan, of course, and the French Open is going on right now. And they play best of 3 out of 5 sets. The men do. The women play 2 out of 3, but it's still grueling regardless. If in some cases they have to. I know that the men, for example, have to get back out and play tomorrow, so it'll be an interesting final. But up until, which is kind of bizarre that they do it like this, because up until the semifinals and finals, they give them a day off in between. Now they go out and they practice technical things. And during a tournament, it's a little bit different. You don't want to lose your edge. So you want to get out on the court, but you're surely not pushing yourself and depleting your energy stores on that recovery day in between. But for sure, so for example, Dominique Thiem and Rafael Nadal are in the final tomorrow. And then Sloane Stephens and Simona Halep are in the women's final. They're not going to be going out into a tennis court on Monday. That's for sure. They're going to rest. They're going to recover. John Davis, who you're going to hear from, he won the state championships. He's not going out and busting hump, the next day after he wins. And he might go out for a recovery ride, maybe. But I'll let him speak to that. But I know what top-tiered athletes are doing. I played very competitively at a high level, and I still do. But I'm around them. I'm surrounded by them. Ovechkin, who just won the Stanley Cup last night, he's not jumping on ice or into the gym today. I'm telling you that right now. Athletes build in massive recovery times during their peak training and then after. So I really want to drive that message home, because Prize meets the needs of the entire population. It's all about the intensity. It's all about the multi-component nature. So on that slide that we just had up there, the women's and the men's data was just mind-blowing in terms of the improvements that they had in their performance. And so as you see on this slide, just massive. I mean, 5 times, not just, 1 time or 2. Well, some of them are 2, but I mean, these were massive improvements, and these were fit men and women. So again, what's very important here is that they're already coming in at a very high level. The expectation, or the realistic expectation, of them to improve on anything is very, very low. So I hope I was able to make that point really clear. This study as well was really well received and was published in top leading scientific peer-reviewed journals. So that's what I have for you all today. I apologize again for the little bit of a slow start with the slides coming up. Eric, thank you again for your magical job there of bringing this up. Mark, thanks for that wonderful introduction. And Lori, thank you for pulling this all together. And I'm really excited for you to hear from, a Masters champion, John Davis, who has implemented the Prize protocol into his routine. And he's going to share a little bit more about the specifics, which I would imagine all of you are probably wondering, how do I get my hands on this? I know if I was listening, so I always like to approach my presentation from a standpoint, if I was a listener on this, and I had a scientist who was leading his field and what he does, and explaining this, what are the nuts and bolts? What are the tools that I need to be able to go out and achieve these same results? And so that's what we're moving into right now. So thank you all.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Paul, for everything. I just, thank you for all of your research too, and everything that you've done. I just need to know, where were you like 20 years ago when,
I wish I knew me 20 years ago.
Oh my goodness. Because I've been training for a long time. I was a collegiate athlete as a skier, downhill skier through college, raced for Montana State ski team. And then after that, I got into martial arts. I'm an 8th degree black belt in Kung Fu Sansu. And I got into bike racing too. And I was racing mountain bikes and road bikes. So as Dr. Paul said, I've just I used to train. So this is what I used to do. This is, and I'm almost embarrassed to say this, because my coaches wanted me to get as light as possible. So I go out on a 3, 4, 5 hour ride, and then they would have me not eat for 3 or 4 hours after I finished. And right now I sit at, 180 pounds, and I was 158 pounds. My family and friends were asking me if I was okay, if I was sick. They're like, are you trying to lose weight? Are you trying to get light? And I just totally look gaunt. And I think I lost a ton of power. And I was training 400 and 500 miles a week, 18 hours a week, and working 40 hours a week. It was just like an absolute ton. I had coaches to tell me how much to ride, but I didn't have anybody on the nutrition side. I didn't follow anything like a Prize protocol or anything like that. I just ate as much stuff as I could, and I was hungry, and I ate and I ate and I ate, and probably not all the right stuff. And I know it wasn't. And now in contrast, so what in the gap, there was a gap there to where I took like 10 years off the bike, and started a business, and got my 8th degree, master's degree in Kung Fu, kind of focused on that. And I kind of went up in weight a little bit. So I was close to 190 pounds. And from there, I'm like, I'm an athlete. I can get it off. So I got back into riding and kind of rode, and spent like 2 years trying to get my weight back down. All I wanted to see is 179. That would have made my day. And I get down to like 182, and I would try to, restrict my calories, and it just wasn't coming off. So I was introduced to the protein pacing and the nutritional cleansing, and I started following that, and within a very short time, less than 2 months, I dropped 20 pounds. And I actually got down to 169, and I was blown away with the results that I was getting. And I wasn't doing anything different. I think I was traveling more and actually exercising less than when I first started the program. And I'm like, this is interesting. I never understood the power of nutrition. I was always more focused on the training aspect and doing more. If you wanted more results, you had to do more. So I was into the doing more. That was kind of the culture. So I started being a student of the nutrition and doing the protein pacing and intermittent fasting. And I still fast. If I'm not racing, I actually fast on Mondays. It's a nutritionally supported fast, so I cleanse on Mondays and let my body rest and repair. I do that all throughout the year, unless I have a big race or something else coming up the next weekend, because I don't want to tax my body anymore. But the results have been absolutely amazing. In 2016, so 10 years over, like 11 years off the bike, came back, and I won the West Coast Championship mountain biking in 2016. And I was blown away on how fast I got results and how little I was training. So I switched over to doing more road than mountain. And on the road, last year, I kind of spent the year kind of learning, the ropes again, because I hadn't raced criteriums or road in so long. I got back into it, and pretty soon I was getting top fives, and I'm training on the bike 3 days a week, 4 days a week, maybe. Not a large volume. Before I was doing 7 days a week and 400 and 500 miles, and now I'm doing 100, 150 miles a week, a fifth of what I was doing before. And I feel super, super strong. So last year I did the state championships for criterium, and, I'm still kind of learning the timing and everything of racing. And I get second, totally blown away again at my results. So this year, my focus was to really go after the state championships. And, I ended up winning it. It was just 2 weeks ago. Again, for my age group, I'm 50 years old. And for me to be like having this kind of results with training, as little I do, like 2 days of cross training, like 40 minutes a time, do the stretching. I don't do enough stretching, I'll admit to that. So, but I do some resistance, and I follow the price protocol. Absolutely. Like, I take my weight, I'm 180 pounds. So I make sure that I get in 180 grams of protein per day. And, I pace it out in the morning, every 2 to 3 hours. I don't do anything more than, 40 grams of protein, between 30 and 40 grams of protein every 2 to 3 hours. And it's much smaller meals, all paced throughout the day. And I do my, high quality protein shake before I go to bed, which keeps me satisfied and hunger. And people ask me, are you still doing those shakes? Are you still doing that? And they're like, why are you still doing it? And I'm like, I feel better when I do. I feel better. I'm stronger. And sometimes I think I took a little break from it, and I actually felt worse when I wasn't doing the intermittent fasting, and when I wasn't, and I was hungrier too, because the protein satisfies my cravings. And so I just have to really thank, Dr. Paul, for the research that you've done, because I've taken it on. I've become a real student of it. And, I'm living proof on, just putting it to test and seeing, what my body was like before and what my body is like now, and how much stronger I feel. And my results are just amazing. So I have to encourage anybody out there that's listening to this is, don't take my word for it. Try it for a month, and, see, you'll see results really quickly. So I just have to, thank Dr. Paul for the study and everything that he's done, because it has really changed my life. So thank you, Dr. Paul. Beautiful. All right, and I'm going to pass it back to Lori. And Lori, thank you so much for putting the call together, and I'm honored to be a part of it.
Mark, are you jumping out first? No, I think his screen might be frozen.
Yeah, Laurie, no, I'm here. I'm very happy for that just to run through, but it would give me a huge pleasure just to give you a quick introduction if you don't mind. How's that sound?
Go for it.
Yeah, and thanks very much to the two previous speakers. What a phenomenal amount of quality information. That's just so, my ears are burning with the information. I look forward to going back and applying it. And I must say, as a very amateur triathlete who's struggled with his performance abilities over the years, I too have tried to apply some of what's been talked about tonight and have experienced some great results. And one of those people that's helped me to focus in on some of the things I need to do is the lovely Laurie Clark, who's also with us tonight. Laurie actually has 3 university degrees and has a strong, very credible background in the health sciences, fitness and holistic healing and nutrition. What she doesn't know about how to apply nutrition in practice, nobody needs to know. She has worked at the federal, provincial and municipal levels within government, providing advice and guidance on a range of community, organizations in this field. She won't mind me saying so, I don't think, but she is, believe it or not, 55 years of age. I get it out quickly, but doesn't look an age past 40. She's a retired teacher, and she has committed herself to a whole approach to sport and nutrition, and is committed to helping other people achieve their very best in their life. She's a medaled fitness competitor, and is really just passionate about bringing a healthy lifestyle. And as Dr. Paul Asiero said at the beginning, making this accessible. And this is what really caught my attention, making it accessible to the vast majority of people out there who get so confused with what to do. So on that note, Laurie, it gives me great pleasure to hear how to do it in practice. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Mark. And it's so funny because I remember when I turned 50 and somebody asked me, do you mind if I share your age? And I'm like, of course, because my birthday's on the 29th and I'm 29 forever. And anybody who knows me knows I'm usually 8, at least a good part of every single day. So the age of my birth certificate is just the number of times that, I've circled around 365 days. But one of the things I love, and thank you so much for that introduction. And Paul, every time I hear the research, I get so excited because I've been that person with her head in the books, studying this stuff for decades. And to have a protocol that, as Mark just said, is simple and easy. And as you heard John say, because the contrast of not and then incorporating is always the best way yourself to realize that there's always going to be diets that come and go. There's always going to be fads that come and go. But our human body, this juicy little home that's your forever home, doesn't come and go. We still have a 2 million year old reptilian brain in the back. And yes, we have an amygdala at the front and a whole bunch of neocortex that allows us as humans to advance knowledge in beautiful ways. And certain people like Dr. Paul Arciero take it to that nth degree that makes it easy for all of us to incorporate. But that's the thing, is that the house we live in forever is still the same. It's a bunch of bones, a bunch of muscles, a whole bunch of juicy stuff, and about 70% water and fluids that carries us through time and space. And what I love, and if we flip to the next slide, Eric, when we're speaking about athletes, we have specific concerns that are slightly different than other people, because all of us have the same basic structure, but depending on how that is all put together, in what shape or size, determines how you can show up in life and move through time and space. So what I wanted to do really quickly was just touch on a couple of very specific concerns and why there's a particular way I choose, the tools that I use that a lot of people are asking about in the chat that I just want to touch on, and then we're going to jump into some Q&A. So typically, athletes have less body fat than the average person. Why is that significant? Because body fat is where you store toxins. So when you're running around and breathing in more oxygen that maybe has exhaust fumes, if you're on a bike or running and there's vehicles around you, if you're in a gym a lot more, or you're in a pool, which is where I grew up as a kid, smelling, massive amounts of chlorine, it is not the greatest when your body fat is lower, because there's less ability to store toxins. If you are a kid or you have children, they have even less ability to manage all of the toxins that are coming in. So tuck away toxicity. That's a huge piece of concern for athletes. Inflammation. You train to break your body down. So you're going to create inflammation. You're going to create discomfort. You're going to burn through your energy stores. So how you prepare your body to work out, how you recover your body from workout is more important than ever. And I'll share a little bit about my story, because in the last 2 years, the recovery piece and the lack of activity that I've been able to do is going to blow your mind. And Dr. Paul talked about this in the study that he was focusing on, that when you look at nutrition, I firmly believe nutrition is 90% of the piece of the puzzle for everybody, including athletes who may not like to hear that, but that's the reality. And of course, other issues that affect performance, training, of course, hydration, recovery, and nutrition and sleep. And I think, Eric, on the next slide, it'll pick up some of the other concerns that manage. So hydration, how do you get enough hydration into your body? How do you maintain that? How do you hydrate on the go? How do you make sure that the body can work as it's supposed to? Because you have all these beautiful organs that are in your body. Your body's a miracle. If they're shriveled up, dried little raisins, do you really think that any performance benefit is going to come out of grinding on a bike, grinding on a road, hitting the pool, jumping into the gym? It doesn't matter the sport. If you have shriveled little raisins that are called organs, you are operating subpar. So your results, no matter how perfect your training, are going to be compromised. Hydration is free. It is that important. You can go a long time without eating before anything really happens to you, but you can't go very long without drinking. And John alluded to that when he was speaking about the value of the hydration piece as well in his performance. Okay, next slide, Eric, please. Sleep and recovery. So I'm going to just pause for a second and give you 30 seconds of my story. I have been an active athlete all my life. I call myself sort of a generalist because I've always been able to be really good. I was really good at tennis. I was really good at swimming. I was really good at gymnastics. I was really good at field hockey, really good at rollerblading, like kind of all the stuff, really good at biking. I didn't take anything past provincial level, but I can pretty much do anything active. And as long as my body is moving around, I've been blessed to have this beautiful ability to be active and keep my body in time and space. Well, 2 years ago, I crashed on my bicycle and I broke the head of my femur, and the bone healed. Bones heal quick. It healed in a week, boom, done. But the tissue damage and the nerve damage and the inflammation around the joint has meant that this is coming on my second year of not being able to get on a bike, on a road, being able to just barely get going with rollerblades again because of range of movement, and still basically in rebuild mode as my body goes through the fun journey of healing. But here's the cool thing. My body composition is almost the same. I have actually been able, because I just went and got my metrics done, I've actually been able to drop my body fat a couple of percent over the last few years, not from exercise, but from sleeping properly, which I never did. I was like the president of the I don't need to sleep mode, I'll sleep when I'm dead club. Not a good idea. I almost died. So because I'm sleeping properly, because I'm hydrating properly, and because I am following Dr. Paul's protocol of protein pacing and intermittent fasting. So while I can stretch and I can do some of the activities in the rise part of the protocol, a lot of it I'm still not able to do. So how is it that I can still show up and I've got body composition, I have abs, I've got core strength that allows me to do the things I want to do, even though I may not be where I want to be at an athlete performance level? How significant is it that because of the nutritional profile I've been using for the last 7 years, I've been able to navigate this extended rest and recovery period, which is what I want to call it, in order to come out the other end stronger. So John just shared his story about moving through the rankings and rebuilding his cycling career to number one, and incorporating prize protocol as a significant factor. So I hope you caught that. I'm the other side of the coin, where I'm on the extended rest and recover period, and the protein pacing and intermittent fasting has been a godsend. It has been a lifesaver. It has allowed my body to rest and recover without having the ability to be active in the way I want. And this is the significance and the power of paying attention as an athlete to your body. You've got to listen to your body. Okay, next slide, Eric, please. I choose the tool of Isogenics. So there's all kinds of products out there. I have probably used them because I'm just that old. I've probably used them all because Joe Weider, who produced the first protein shake in the 70s, I actually was around when that happened and I knew about it. And Dr. Paul Anderson, who happens to be the formulator of Isogenics products, was actually the formulator of that first shake. Take note. So what I like about Isogenics is that you're getting alkaline nutrition. As an athlete, every time you train, you create acidity in your body. So to be able to manage that and alkalize it quick is phenomenal. I choose Isogenics because the work's already been done. The efficacy of the products mean that my canister of Hydrate and John's in California and Mark's over in England and Elaine's in Ireland is all the same all the time. The consistency and efficacy is there because the company spends millions and millions of dollars in-house and out of house for making sure that the products reach their excessively high standards. That matters to everybody, but as an athlete, it really matters. Isogenics Amp line is Informed Sport certified. What does that mean? Well, my kids were elite level. They were a brother-sister ice dance team at the national level for 10 years. And for the last half of their skating career, we had Isogenics as part of our life. That's actually how I got into the company, because I had a daughter who was 13, dairy allergic, and her body was breaking down because she was a fussy eater. She didn't like meat. She was more plant-based. I was going through everything on the market. I've bought retail. I've gone to high quality direct sales. I bought in natural food. Like, you want to talk about products, I've used them all. I've tried them all. And the nice thing with Isogenics is that the live digestive enzymes, the quality of the protein, and the fact that I had, as someone who's lactose intolerant, no upset, meant that my kid at 13, essentially, her main source of protein for the last 10 years has been Isogenics protein, because it's what digests in her body. Her body composition is based on that. That's a great testimonial that if you can pour this into your kid, amazing as an athlete at a national level. So it means that your body doesn't break down. It means that your body can recover. But we used to get like this thick from the World Doping Agency, all the stuff. Every time nationals would come up, you got to go through this endless amount of pages of products that you can't be using in order to be considered clean. As a fitness competitor, it was a P test, same thing. You've got, any athlete knows if you compete at a high level that you've got to meet these standards. Well, Informed Sport certified means that the work's already been done. It's clean, it's clear. It always was. Isogenics, before it was Informed Sport certified, was always cleared. Many, many elite level, national level, world, Olympic athletes have been using Isogenics for a long time because of that reason. So that's another reason why I love this tool. The other thing with Isogenics is that it is a combined system. So when you look at Dr. Paul's protocol of protein pacing and intermittent fasting, how cool is it that Isogenics already has done the work? So the system exists. So as an athlete, I have this much space in my brain that is being used up on my training. When am I going to train? When am I going to eat? When am I going to sleep? When am I going to do blah, 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 and then do life on top of it? If I have to add nutrition in, it's a huge space. The cool thing with Isogenics is the work is done. That means I don't have to think about it. I just have to get it into my body. And because of the PRIZE protocol, it's fantastic because, as John said, take your body weight, space out no more than 40 grams at a time every few hours through the day, boom, bang, done. Easy peasy, simple. Intermittent fasting, nutrient supported, schedules there, protocols there. Here's your box, go, done. It actually tastes good on top of it. It's well priced on top of it. The distribution model means it shows up at my door. So wherever I'm competing, I can send it to the location and it drop boxes there. So as an athlete who travels, this is unbelievable. And I have worked with enough athletes that when you are traveling to strange, unusual countries, which has strange, unusual food. So if I take me, I live in North America, in Canada, I go over to Asia, and I'm not a big fan of Asian food that's like the raw fish and strange, unusual things that I don't recognize. It's fine on a normal day. I'm going to say yes and try everything. But if I'm competing, I cannot afford for my stomach to be upset. I cannot afford for my body not to sleep because something didn't digest well. I cannot afford the risk of food in a restaurant environment not being quality enough, so I react to it. So how cool is it that I have this security, this calming knowledge to reduce my anxiety, to know that my nutrition is on point? And I'll use a testimonial of Anna Norquist, who is an LPGA top-ranked golfer who is part of Team Isogenics Elite, who said the best part about Isogenics for her is that she has struggled with her gut throughout her entire golf career. And for the first time in her golf career, after bringing Isogenics into her life and into her lifestyle, she felt like she could count on her body, on her belly, to do what it was meant to do and not upset her and not take her out of the game. Can you imagine? And maybe if you're listening, you're one of those athletes that has never really felt like you got the best performance possible because your gut took you out of the game. And I mean, if you're anybody in the race world, whether it's a run race or a tri race or a bike race or a swim, how often are you taken out of your game because your gut is not on point? This is a huge, huge piece of the puzzle, being able to know that you can count on your Isogenics to facilitate. Now, you can go into isoproduct.com. You can get the fast facts. You can get all of the information about Isogenics. I've also done a couple of recorded calls that go into what the basics are around the products. So for example, because I want to open it up to Q&A, I'll just take one of my favorite products, which is Amped Recover. Amped Recover is branched chain amino acids. It is a complete profile. What that means is if you're looking to lose weight, you get a protein hit during the day, which manages your hunger if you're sipping on it all day long. As an athlete, it's going to recover you by replenishing, breaking down your body immediately after. So you're going to toss a scoop of that into your post-workout meal. But the part that's not written anywhere that I love is that I actually put a scoop of Recover with Hydrate while I'm working out. So I'll start drinking that before I go do whatever my workout is. I'll finish it while I'm working out. And then the second scoop, because the bottle says 2, the second one goes into my post-workout meal. Why? Because I like to recover as I go. I just happen to have noticed that that's really working well for me. So there's all kinds of information. There's all kinds of people who've used these products and found all the best ways to be able to put it into your body. Amped Power, the last thing I'll say, that goes into my body every morning. So does E-Shots. Why? That's actually brain food. There is scientific data that says the E-Shots, and mostly it's the ingredients in the E-Shots, not the caffeine. It's the other herbals and botanicals and adaptogens, as well as the creatine and power, that actually make my brain work better. at any age, making my brain work better is a good thing. So I use those products not just for working out, but I use them for neural health. This is why I love this company. And this is why I hang my hat for athletes and say, you know, the data is there, the scientific research is there for how to get the best bang for your buck nutritionally. Do your training, get your training programs from whoever you need to get them from, but nutritionally follow what Dr. Paul Arciero is saying. And then I love the tool because I've done enough of the work around the tool, the nutritional tool, that adding Isagenix in as that piece of the puzzle is going to give you exponential results. So with that, I want to open up the floor, and I think Eric's on controls. If you have questions, I know Eric was picking up a bunch of questions in the chat. Eric, if I can cede it over to you right now, just to sort of, do you want to start with calling people out that you've picked up questions on, or how do you want to do this?
Well, I'll give you all the ability to unmute, and with that, we'll be able to have really good questions. I know some questions regarded low carbs, some question regarded vegan versus animal protein. So maybe you want to touch on that, because I saw that you wrote, Lori, on the chat that you wanted to touch on that as well.
Okay, sure. I can quickly do that. And then Dr. Paul, if you want to add in, I was vegan and vegetarian for about 15 years after my daughter was born, not by choice, by necessity. My whole body composition changed. And I didn't have Isagenix in my life at that time so I was using proteins, but they were not complete proteins. And so what I love about Isagenix, if you're a vegan athlete, you can totally get the results you want. The cool thing with Isagenix is that the plant-based proteins are complete proteins, which is why it's not just pea protein only or brown rice protein only. You're getting a combination because it's the synergistic effect of all of the plant-based proteins that are put together the way Isagenix does that gives you the complete protein profile that your body needs. In terms of vegans, all of the AMP line, other than the protein, so whether it's AMP bars or shakes, all of the other products, Recover, eShots, Nox, Hydrate, and Power, and Nitro, they're all vegan. So hopefully that helps answer that a little bit. And Dr. Paul Arciero, do you want to jump out? I'm passionate. I got a whole story on fitness competitors and low carb recommendations before I blast that whole concept out. Do you have anything to add to that?
The only thing I'll add, Lori, is on the plant-based. You know, I'm a proponent of plant-based, but you have to be a real sleuth in order to do it properly. And what I mean by that is, as you described, plant proteins by themselves have a really difficult time containing the full complement of all of the amino acids that are required to enable protein synthesis to occur in the body. And so if you do choose to be vegan or plant-based, you just have to make sure that you are combining plant sources together so that you form the complete protein in the body to allow protein synthesis to occur. Now, there used to be this thought that as long as it was within a 24-hour period, you're okay, but that research is not really supported anymore, that if you really want to truly maximize and optimize. Now, can you form proteins by eating plant sources at different times during the day? Yeah, but not very well. You're not going to have a very healthy body composition, or don't expect to be an athlete. That's for sure. So I think we have to talk about, what we're striving for, and that's to provide people the most ideal environment. So plant-based can do it. In fact, if you do it right, Isagenix has their plant-based line. That's a vegan, line of products in their Isoline shakes, and so Isoline Pro. And so you can definitely do it. The brown rice protein and the pea protein are two excellent sources. So that's one way to achieve a plant-based, high-quality nourishment to give you the results that you want. Now, having even said that, though, even though that's top quality of animal is still the most well absorbed into our body. And so I would recommend that maybe a combination for people, or if somebody was really determined to stay 100% plant-based vegan, then they would just make sure that they use a top quality. Because again, the three primary drivers of protein pacing that elicit the greatest benefit are the quality. You have to pay attention to the quality. Two, you have to pay attention to the quantity. And John mentioned his formula that he uses. I, of course, have algorithms that incorporate lots of different things other than body weight. You're also your age, your height, your weight, your activity level, your sex, male, female. So those also go into the algorithms that I've developed that make it even more specific and customized. And then the third type is the timing and the frequency, that you have to deliver it at the right time. So all that being equal, animal protein really comes out above in terms of its ability to benefit the body. But I do a combination personally because I like some of the health benefits of the plant-based. Now shifting gears over to the low carb, you don't want to ever go low carb if you're not doing it right. It just doesn't make any sense. And in fact, there's no data, scientific data, that has studied a low carb. And I think what we're really talking about, so if we let the cat out of the bag here, we're talking about the ketogenic fat adapted diet is really what people talk about when they say low carb, because what else is there? Well, there's protein and then there's fat. And so if you're going low carb, of those two, you don't want to go high protein. You want to go protein pacing. So what's the other only nutrient left over? That's fat. So when people talk about low carb, it's a fat adapted / ketogenic diet. And there's just not a lot of good research in healthy people. There is data in epilepsy and seizures, which has been around since 1921, showing that a ketogenic fat adapted diet can be beneficial in somewhere between 30 to up to 70% of epileptics to help with seizures. But in a healthy population and a healthy individual that is looking to garner maximal health, maximal performance benefit, to go ketogenic or fat adapted, low carb, as some people call it, is very difficult to do and not necessarily warranted from a health standpoint, because you're missing out on some of the very important phytonutrients and phytochemicals and even adaptogens that are found within plants that are the primary, obviously, sources of carbohydrate. So in fiber, the benefit of fiber, I think, is being missed again. It's funny, I've been at this for over 30 years. As a scientist, I've been at this for over 30 years, and it's amazing how things just keep on going around in a cycle. And the thing that has never changed is protein pacing. It's always been there. It'll never go away. It's the foundation of everyone's diet. But fats and carbs are always, waning and ebbing and flowing, I should say. So there's just not a lot of good evidence. There are some anecdotal reports of some endurance athletes who have fat adapted really well. It takes a while. It's not something that you can do overnight. Your body has to adjust to it because of the enzymes and the hormones in your body that need to be adapted to it. So for the typical person, it's going to take anywhere between 2 to 4 weeks. Don't expect all of a sudden, change to a fat adapted low carb diet and start feeling great. You're going to feel pretty crappy. But here's where the real challenge and limitation, and again, I'm not advocating never to do for everybody a fat adapted ketogenic diet. For some people, there could be some usefulness to it. However, I wouldn't recommend it long term, because ultimately the body needs to have that source of carbohydrate. It's just what we have been evolved to benefit from. It's the modernized version of the carbohydrates that our bodies will never become accustomed to. So, but the grains, the legumes, the fruits and the vegetables, those are really important sources of, like I said, phytochemicals, fiber being one of the most, but all the vitamins that are found within those and minerals. So the danger for most people on a fat adapted low carbohydrate diet is when they do come off of it. And we all know that, we all have moments of weakness and vulnerability. The problem is that you've changed the functioning and the activity of the enzymes in your body, primarily those on your cells, go into overdrive when you've deprived yourself of a necessary nutrient, in this case, carbohydrate. So upon ingesting even a small amount of carbohydrate, your body's not going to digest it, absorb it, transport it, metabolize it in the same way it was accustomed to doing before you adapted to this higher fat diet. So that when you do take in that carbohydrate, the body reacts like a sponge to water and it just soaks it up. So, and that's a common consequence for everybody who's experienced a ketogenic, fat-adapted, low-carbohydrate diet and has had moments of weakness or vulnerability and has eaten some carbohydrate. All of a sudden, oh my God, I just gained every single pound of that carbohydrate and then some. So that's the downfall, I think, for a lot of people. Now, here's something on that topic. We all talk about, maintaining this rigidity of lifestyle. That's crazy talk. No one should live with, a rigidity, restrained eating type of mindset. The beauty of what John and Lori and all of us have been stressing, I hope, is that balance is, of course, important. Realistic is important. But then scientific proven effectiveness should be at the top priority. But then also understanding that, yes, it's okay to, at various times indulge on foods that you enjoy. Of course, that's unhealthy if you don't. So don't ever think that, only the best people and the healthiest people don't eat any of that stuff. That's just simply not true. It's healthy to do that. For lots of different reasons, keeping your brain satisfied and keeping those enzymes and the rest of the body responding to those foods on occasion normally so that they can burn them and get rid of them the way they should, as opposed to sucking them in like a sponge. So there's some real value. And I'm not a big proponent of low carb, definitely not as a long-term weight loss strategy or a performance strategy, but like everything, if people wanted to experiment with it and periodize it for 6 to 8 weeks and see how their body responds, and then slowly introducing back in a very deliberate way. I explain this in my book. It could be beneficial, but across the board, just to kind of put out there, a low carb diet as the next solution to health and performance would be very limiting and short-sighted.
Well, Dr. Arciero, this is such valuable information, and to Laurie and John, your experiences too of how you've taken on board this science and applied it in real terms is just fantastic. I'm sure there are people on the call here tonight. It's great to see so many people with us listening into all of this information that would like to ask a question online. Of course, if people are feeling a wee bit nervous coming forward, that's fine. But maybe, Eric, if you kind of have a look and see if people put up their hand, maybe on the screen, and unmute them and let them come in, just give it a few seconds to allow people to jump forward, that would be great.
I know Joseph had a question about my pre-workout and during training. I'll answer that real quick. So he wanted to know what I did before and sort of my prep. Just really quickly, basically I do the Isolene Pro shake before, and before, a Criterium or before an 80-mile ride, it's the same thing because it settles really well with my gut, and I can do it, 10 minutes beforehand, and it's not a problem for me. And then I use the Nitro, the Amp Nitro beforehand, and I do the Ionics beforehand too. And then during the ride, I'll do gels, every hour, 45 minutes, depending on the intensity. And the heat also has, depending on how often I do it. On a long ride, I might take a bar, the Isolene bar, and do a bar, halfway through. But again, that's like on a long ride, like 80 or 90 mile ride. I'll do a bar, and then I'll, do some more gels after that. And then afterwards, I'll do the Isa Pro, not the Isolene Pro, but just the Isa Pro. I'll do 2 scoops of that with the Amp Recovery, with the greens and the Ionics right after. And then during, I'll use that Amped Hydrate with the Amped Recovery in my water bottles for my hydration. So that's basically it. And then, you know, maybe an hour, hour and a half after I do my ISA Pro shake, I'll do a meal. And like and one thing that you can't do with the program is you can't add up calories, because the calories don't add up. I might burn 5,000 calories for the day, and I might intake 2,000. It just doesn't make sense because the products are so nutritionally dense. But that's basically my program that I stick to.
Thanks,
Great.
John.
Thanks, John, for that. I just am having a quick flick through the questions coming on here. I mean, we don't get a chance to speak to such sports nutrition experts like this all the time. So please, you know, feel free to pluck up the confidence to come forward if you want to ask some questions. But there is one here from Cindy that wants to know here's one quick one from Cindy Little, and then hold that question there, and we'll come straight back. Is that you, Cindy, raising your hand there? Yeah. Yeah. Fire away.
All right, so a lot of us are doing the Belly Buster here in Canada, and we've had the question in our Belly Buster group, can I do the Belly Buster program, which is ISA Pro and ISA Greens, at bedtime on a cleanse day? I think it's a pro, especially because I'm training for a fitness competition, and obviously protein would be good still on a cleanse day, but there's other people that that are concerned they want to follow the protocol of a cleanse day.
Laurie, is that something you can maybe pick up to start with, and maybe John and Paul can feed into that?
Well, the only thing I'll do, and then I'm going to segue it over to Dr. Paul, is that I reached out to David Despain at Isogenics for confirmation, and he said no protein on cleanse days. So other than the chewables, which is part of the protocol, so no to the Belly Buster on cleanse days. I advocate protein loading anyways before intermittent fasting, just because I find people get a better result, especially women, by doing that. And of course, immediately after your intermittent fasting, you're going to start with your high quality protein. So my answer is no Belly Busters on cleanse days. But I'd be interested, Dr. Paul, if you had some anything to add to that.
Sure. Yeah. No, I think, Cindy, that's a great question, especially for someone who is a performance athlete like yourself. And the way that Laurie answered it is probably the appropriate way to do it from corporate and from Isogenics, because, you know, as the pure Belly Buster goes, or I'm sorry, the cleanse goes, you really want to use that opportunity for the digestive tract and the body to really undergo what the intention of the cleanse is to do, and that is to, you know, cleanse and to help begin that mobilization process of the toxins, which of course I've shown in my research to happen at a very high level. Oxidative stress goes way down. So imposing a Belly Buster on that environment would not be favorable to those things. And here's why I always have a caveat. You know, as a performance athlete, or anyone that has a slightly different intention, you have to always keep an eye for what is the goal and what's the purpose. And so if you've fasted since the night before, and it's been almost a near 24-hour time period, and you are an athlete who has to maintain that level of you know, the body composition goal that you're striving for, I would say experiment with it and see how it goes. It's not going to, you know, by that time, if you've had a 24-hour fasting period, you know, it's not going to negate everything that happened. I don't believe. I think it still could be possible, but I don't think there's a clear-cut answer, and I wouldn't ever say, yes, it's totally acceptable, or actually no, that it's definitely not acceptable. I think the general rule of thumb is to not do it, and so for most people that are wanting to truly experience that optimal cleanse of the mobilization of the toxins and the true value that it has on the GI tract and the other and the hormones, for example, that's also favorably changed. I would say that, you know, try to abstain from doing that. But if there is that goal of body composition and lean muscle mass, I would say that it's been a 24-hour period from the day before, then it is maybe an opportunity. One thing, and I know no one asked this, and Laura, you did a fantastic job, but Informed Sport is at this conference. So here I am, I'm with the top sport scientists and experts in their field in the world. This is an International Society of Sport Nutrition Conference here in Florida that I was honored at last night, and I'm still just totally blown away. But I was able to chat with the Informed Sport delegates that were here, and these were high-ranking individuals. In fact, the one gentleman instituted the Informed Sport here in North America for Canada, US, and Mexico. It's unbelievable. But I have some literature here on it, and there's not a lot of companies that have done their due diligence and invested the tens of thousands of dollars in this certification of Informed Sport. It's so much, it's so vastly different from, for example, NSF. NSF is kind of, what we hear about all over the States, maybe even into Canada, and even some professional organizations only recognize it. Well, one actually, without any credible or valid grounds to stand on. There's no argument in the industry, and this is among all of the companies and organizations that test for the quality of the products for athletes of any level. Isagenix has the gold standard in Informed Sport in terms of testing for their products and safety and labeling in a clean way according to what's in their products, because Informed Sport is the most rigorous and stringent of all of the testing organizations and laboratories for sport supplement products. They are the top, and they're worldwide, by the way. I think that's really important. So everyone's gonna start hearing more about Informed Sport because they're leading the way. But the fact that Isagenix, I'm just saying this as a third-party independent, and it's why I use the products, because I want to know when I go into competition, I have absolutely, and when I give them to my 3 children, I want to make sure that when they're competing, there's absolutely no question whether they are fueling themselves and performing at the level that they're performing. That would put that into question from what I've, provided to them. And so, just to give everyone 100% confidence, Informed Sport, which Isagenix has on all of their amped products, is number one.
That's fantastic, Dr. Seria. That's really, really good confidence building stuff. I'm having a look. Dr. Jack Rickey has asked a really interesting question. I made a good comment about what we're trying to achieve with the cleanse days, following on from the comments about the protein loading that Laurie made. Dr. Rickey, if you want to unmute yourself, would you be happy to ask that question, or I can ask it for you?
Yeah, hi, how's it going?
Great, far away.
So are you asking about the question of, I asked a couple of questions. One was about vegan versus animal protein, and the other comment I added on was about using protein on fast days with regards to insulin levels.
That's the one that picked up my my attention. It'd be great if you could maybe put that out to everybody so they understand it.
Sure, absolutely. So one of the goals that I see for the cleanse day program, and even for intermittent fasting, whatever kind of schedule you use, whether it's the 8-16, 8 hours of eating and 16 hours of fasting every day, or doing a 24-hour fast once a week or longer, is the goal is to get insulin levels to drop in our bodies. And one of the things we know about this hormone insulin is it responds to not just carbohydrate intake, but it does also respond to protein and fats to a lesser degree, but it does get stimulated when we consume proteins. So if you're going to consume protein on a cleanse day, you are going to elevate insulin levels. And one of the goals of cleansing and using intermittent fasting is to get that insulin level to drop, because we do know that insulin is a bit of an antagonist to growth hormone. And one of our goals for cleansing, and certainly for athletic performance, is get that growth hormone to boost, right? And as naturally as possible without taking stimulants or supplements. So anytime we can spend more time away from digesting food, in my opinion, and allowing insulin levels to lower, and that allows the growth hormone levels to increase. And this is fairly new in a lot of scientific literature, but it's becoming more popularly used and studied. So with regards to that question on consuming protein on cleanse days, generally speaking, I don't. I try not to consume as much food as possible to get those insulin levels to drop.
Dr. Ritchie, can I just jump in real quickly?
Please.
Yes.
Yeah, no, this is the kind of stuff I love. Yeah, that's a very accurate observation. So in a study that I did, without sparing everyone the details, back in 1993, I provided a glucose challenge to a group of individuals, and their blood glucose and their insulin levels shot up. And then we gave the protein in the form of an amino acid, and the protein had another spike in it. And then we superimposed on top of that the fat, and that caused another increase in the insulin response. So you're exactly right that when protein and fats are consumed, they do influence, in this case, increase insulin levels, but it's usually within an environment in which glucose is already present. And so the reason why the bedtime belly buster, without perhaps the fruits and the greens, is that if it's just isopro alone, even at the end of a cleanse, the likelihood of it significantly increasing insulin is very, very minimized because there's so little carbohydrate already in the isopro. And without the greens and the fruits, if people are adding that, it's definitely going to be lower. So independently, all by itself, protein and fat, its response on the insulin level is fairly minimal, and protein even less so, because it also has a kind of a corresponding or simultaneous increase on the alpha cells inside the pancreas to secrete glucagon. And that, of course, is a diametrically opposing hormone to insulin. So if you're doing the protein belly buster at night, my recommendation, and again, I think we're in agreement. That's the good thing I'm saying, is because if you're considering a bedtime belly buster and you're looking for a fat loss reduction with a growth hormone favorable response on that second night of the fast, then I wouldn't advocate the belly buster. But with Cindy, and that's why I was speaking specifically to her, because she was an athlete, there is some benefit to that. And here's why. If for some people, if you're looking for that enhancement in muscle mass growth, the bedtime belly buster, even with maybe a small serving of the fruits or the greens to provide a little bit of glucose challenge with those amino acids, you're going to have the diurnal, or the nocturnal release of the growth hormone, sometime in the early morning of that night, and that is going to have now a substrate to utilize in protein synthesis, and so that's the benefit of it. So you're going to actually be providing an environment of amino acids with the isopro to help augment and facilitate. While it's still, the insulin itself might be somewhat counterproductive for the growth hormone, it's not to the level, if you're only doing the isopro, to really alter that. But what I feel you're having the benefit of is that you're having the amino acids from the isopro linked with the nocturnal release of the growth hormone to further facilitate and augment protein synthesis. And so that's why I find that some people do respond really well in taking that bedtime belly buster, perhaps at the end. But I would agree, in general, for most people who are looking for fat loss and to really maximize lipolysis, then the bedtime belly buster, especially with the greens and the fruits, on a cleanse day, would be a no-no. So I just wanted to clarify that, because it's another level of understanding and I think opportunity to help facilitate and augment individual people's results better.
Great, thank you very much. It's just such wonderful. I'm sure still loads of us on the call, and we could probably go on for a lot longer, but I am very conscious that we've been on for almost 2 hours. I can't believe how quickly the time has flown by. So thank you once again for everybody for feeding in. Shall we there's one more question from Sabine, who I know is still on the line, that was keen to know just a little bit about what the schedule would look like for competition prep using the protein pacing. I know we've spoken about the cleanse days and the loading and the effect of insulin, etc. But perhaps as a final question, would we be able to look at, you know, what the basic kind of normal competition prep would be building up to competition day by applying this protein pacing approach? Would it be possible to pass comment on that?
Well, I can just speak from my my research and the clients that I work with. Is it wouldn't be much different. So the protein pacing is the mainstay. It's the foundation. I call it the anchor of what you do all the time. And you would adjust it according to your workout and your training leading up to the competition. So John, you know, provides an excellent example of what he does on some of his shorter rides versus some of his longer rides and how he might need to alter it. So I have a very detailed application of the protein sources using the Isagenix products around each of the exercise routines of resistance, interval, stretching, and endurance. And I'll just say in a very basic way that when you're doing the resistance and interval days, because those are more muscle intensive and damaging, that's when you could add in an additional feeding of a protein pacing meal or snack. You know, that would be the ideal time. And again, I'm going to support John. What he does after his ride, he has the IsoPro, I'm sure, waiting in his car. In fact, I know he does because I've rode with him. So, you know, you have the IsoPro on hand, ready to go, so that when you finish that resistance workout or that interval workout, you have your IsoPro right there so that you can grab that additional feeding. But it's really about just delivering the protein in these timed intervals that work for you. And so I generally make the recommendation of 4 to 6, but I really work with the person to find out what they're more likely to do. Are they more likely to eat 4, you know, of these a day or 6? And it would be, in most cases, it's a breakfast, a lunch, a dinner, and then an evening is kind of, if someone's doing 4. If someone's doing 5, it's a breakfast, it's a lunch, it's an afternoon snack, a dinner, and then an evening snack. And if it's 6 meals, it's a breakfast, morning snack, lunch, afternoon snack, dinner, and evening snack. So that's the general format that I use. But again, that changes a little bit, as Dr. Ritchie had questioned. If someone is looking for more fat loss, I have a tendency to front load the day a little bit more. If it's somebody who's an athlete and needs those reserves to facilitate muscle protein synthesis overnight, I have a tendency to, you know, put that afternoon snack and evening snack in if they're doing the 4 or 5. So it really varies on the individual, but that's what it would look like.
Okay.
And I'll just jump in and add, if I can, to what Dr. Paul was saying. And I before I forget, at the end of the call, Dr. Paul, can you put into the chat, or maybe when I'm finished, just tell us and we'll type it in, where people can find the prize protocol information. So, because I know you have a website that they can go look at the detail and the protocols and more specific. So if you don't mind making sure that we have access to that. And as a fitness competitor who my only exposure to competing was because of Isagenix, it was never on my radar to wear 6 inches of bikini at the age of 48 and 50 on a stage with kids that I used to teach. So that being what it is, the biggest comment I tell people when they're training for a fitness competition is that the schedule of meals is typically, you know, 6 meals of chicken, rice, and some green vegetable like broccoli. I always ask better. It's always about asking questions. Is it organic chicken? Is it organic broccoli? How fresh is it? How much is the density of the rice? Is it white rice, brown rice? Is it organic? And the reason for that is the nutrient absorption. And this is why so many fitness competitors particularly have a brutal time putting on the lean muscle they need, and they're grinding it in the gym and they're not getting the results they want, and they feel like garbage because the quality of the nutrients is not high enough for their body at the intensity of what they're doing to get a result. And then I'll say, well, you've got to substitute. Like if you put higher density protein in, so you're using Isagenix, Isoline, or Isoline Pro, or IsoPro in varying degrees, as Dr. Paul said, depending on what your schedule of training is, if you work during the day and you work out at night, or if you're getting up and doing fasted workouts, all of that plays into the quality of what you're doing. You know, when you're getting 94% absorption of protein into your muscle bellies versus an organic piece of chicken at best is going to give you 65 to 70%, of course you're going to get a better result. And so for someone like me who had a shake the day of her fitness competition, and people were looking at me who hadn't had water for 3 days, and I'm like, are you crazy? I'm drinking my hydrate through the day. I'm having a shake the morning of, because you don't have to worry about bloating when you have an isogenic shake. And if somebody says they have that as a tendency, I just say, make it, blend it, sit it on the counter for 15 minutes, let the enzymes do the work outside your body, and then sip it slowly. You'll probably notice a difference. Those are things that make a difference. And when you're leading up to a fitness competition, the traditional Neanderthal 1972 diet, which scarily enough is still in existence, is to cut your carbs. Well, that means shut your brain off. And, you know, the biggest thing we need to know is that the body works as fast as the brain is telling it. So if you're trying to get your body, your muscles to move, and your brain is shut down because you haven't given it enough nourishment of what it needs, which is different than what your muscles need, then your body's not going to work. So you're going to get injured, you're going to stay sore, you're going to feel horrible, and you're not going to get the results you're wanting. And so standard normal eating is still the rule of thumb. And I always use intermittent fasting. Back-to-back cleanse days are the best way to lean out heading into a fitness competition that has ever been in existence. And I've seen everything out there, and I'm looking at it saying, I'm on stage for a couple of hours and I'm probably going to book a photo shoot the next day, and that's it. Then I go back to life. And I prefer being, you know, I always say I'm 2 weeks out of photo shoot ready all the time, because that's the standard, because it's way more fun to just live healthy all the time. And when you want to ramp it up, just dial it in and tighten it a little bit. And then when you want to ease back, just normal living. How cool is it that normal living can be at this elevated state of, can we go play all the time? And that's the biggest piece for any athlete, whether it's a cyclist like John, or whether it's a fitness competitor wanting to get on stage, or a tennis player, is that, do you want to live in extreme deprivation for 24 hours or 48 hours of some competition that you're going to spend the rest of your life remembering because you can never get back to that? Or do you want to look at your life as this beautiful journey that ebbs and flows, and you get some peaks and you get some valleys, but your steady state is always juicy, delicious, yummy, and wonderful? I choose that. And I hope from the call you realize that you're able as well to do the same thing. So we're not going to touch too much more, because as Mark said, we're running to the top of the hour. So I'm going to segue it back to Mark to close off the call. And oh my gosh, Dr. Pallarciero, I know Mark's going to wrap it, but thank you so much. It's absolutely a gift that you were able to join us today.
Well, thank you very much, Laurie. I mean, what a beautiful...
You're very welcome, Laurie.
Sorry, Bob. What a great way to end the call. A fantastic summary. And all I want to say, just to close it off at the hour, is once again, thank you very, very much to Dr. Paul Arciero. Fantastic information. Really appreciate you giving up your valuable time to be with us this evening, and good luck with all the future research. We look forward to following it all and applying the strategies. Laurie, consummate professional, you've been there, done it, tried it. Thank you for imparting your wisdom on all of us. And John Davis, keep up the competition. We all aspire to be like you and be number one. So on that note, let's close off, and thank you very much to everyone for being on the call. Good night.